Episode 9 of Luke Cage is brought to you by Country Time Lemonade. Country Time Lemonade, when you want to remember fucked up shit from your past. Sweet Christmas, this was a pretty damn good episode of Luke Cage, if a little disjointed at times. But there were a lot of big events going on in this episode. Misty Knight is seeing a police psychologist who's trying to desperately get into her head. You have Diamondback, who is quite literally getting up in Mariah's face and forming an uneasy relationship with her as he casually walks into a room and kills about 4 people. And then of course there's Luke Cage, who's walking around town with a couple of bullet wounds, and by the end of the episode, he's being boiled in acid. I think it goes without saying, but in this week's episode of Luke Cage, Luke was an absolute badass. Not only is he being boiled by acid at the end of the episode, just so that they can do some surgery on him, but I think my favorite scene in this episode right here is when Luke is confronted by these 2 cops who thinks he's just a random drunk in the middle of the street, and he has no choice but to take these guys out. But he still does it in the Luke Cage way. He grabs this one cop, shields him with his body, and allows him to get pummeled and blasted multiple times by bullets in all directions. He then manages to take this other guy, pick him up, and throw him right into his car. The best thing about this scene, though, is you get to see all of the action from the cop car's dash cam. The good thing is, thanks to Claire Temple, it looks like Luke might actually be able to get out of this sticky situation where he's been hit by the Judas bullets. They're actually going to find that one scientist who's at Seagate Prison, and luckily they just sort of look him up in the yellow pages, and they also have some crucial information that they acquired from Reva. And with this and the scientist, not only should they be able to figure out why Luke Cage is the way he is, but they'll be able to get the shrapnel out of his body. And they eventually do meet this guy who conveniently has this whole, medical setup in his barn in the backyard. And the only way that this surgery is going to work is if they dip Luke Cage into acid to sort of soften him up, so to speak, so that they can actually do this whole surgery. And Luke Cage is so badass that he takes not just 1, but 2 dips into the acid. However, it's so strong that it actually manages to make him go into cardiac arrest, leaving us on one hell of a cliffhanger. Aside from all the stuff with Luke Cage, there were a number of interesting things going on in this week's episode. Misty Knight was dominating the first half of the episode when they had this police psychologist come in, basically just trying to get her to confess the things she did, how she lost her cool against Claire Temple, and of course just to get a little more pressure from the inspector, who comes down on top of her in this episode. And even though they seem to have a little bit of friction between the two, there's still this line of respect. So much so that the inspector is going to allow Misty Knight to try and track Luke Cage down. She's the only one who can make this happen. And she did it all with Country Time Lemonade. And then, of course, there's Mariah and Diamondback. Mariah, in particular, in this episode was pretty great, as little by little she's becoming the next Mother Mabel. She tries to schedule this big meeting with all of these mob bosses, and she's basically there to let them know that she's ready to get out of the business. However, she has a lot of assets which belong to Cottonmouth, not to mention she still plans on operating from the shadows. The meeting, though, is interrupted when suddenly Diamondback just sort of walks in, and I love that he says that he was invited because he was uninvited, as if he should have been one of the very first people they decided to bring in on this, and he just walks in and starts shooting people, throwing knives at people's face, just to show how crazy and insane he is. He's way more nuts than Cottonmouth ever was, and that's because he's kind of like a mad dog without a leash. He just has no control over himself. He just loves controlled chaos, and he feels like everything belongs to him, including everything that belongs to Mariah. And this is where things start to get really interesting, because Mariah knows that he has access to bullets which can kill Luke Cage. She has access to the police, so she wants to partner up with Diamondback, take his weapons, give them to the police, that way they can hunt down Luke Cage and blast his ass away. So what's the rundown on this episode of Luke Cage Dash Cam Kick Assery? This one was really good right here. Every episode always manages to just show how strong Luke Cage is. Not just in all of the damage that he can cause, but just the things that he goes through, especially in this episode right here. Not only after being shot with these incredibly destructive bullets can he actually fight off cops and still get shot multiple times, but but he takes a couple of acid baths in this episode, and it doesn't even come close to really harming him, aside from the fact that it does make him have a heart attack and he knocks himself out. But I'm sure he's going to be just fine. This is probably going to be exactly what the big guy needs in order to go through his surgery. I still like how they show multiple times like how tough he is by the doctor actually constantly putting scalpels to his body, and they're constantly breaking. Something about that's really funny. And yes, I said it before, I do think it's a little convenient that that doctor still has like all of that stuff to, use on Luke Cage, all of the stuff that he stole after everything got covered up. I just think it's a little too strange. You would think for people who are trying to cover shit up, they wouldn't allow a doctor to be able to take this much equipment. Not to mention, if that equipment went missing, they'd probably realize who took it in the first place. Maybe this guy's doing a really good job of hiding, but if Claire Temple and Luke Cage could find him so easily, I imagine the people who are really behind all of this could have probably found him as well. But it's a comic book show. I'm willing to look the other way on this one. If anything, a lot of the scenes with Luke Cage this week were great. The fact that he was still able to stand in this episode is an absolute miracle. And it's funny because any other normal person would have been killed by this, but he just walks into a freaking laundromat, puts on some new clothes, and boom, Band-Aid on the situation. Other than that, I think the best parts of this episode were definitely all the Misty Knight scenes. They were definitely, I think, the most tense in terms of the dialogue, the psychologist and everything, getting into her head. He was one slick little bastard. And then, of course, there's Diamondback and Mariah. The Diamondback scene was just a way to establish like how ruthless this character is, especially when compared to some of the other villains of the show. He's so much more theatrical than any other villain that we've had from the series, and some might not like the over-the-top cheesiness. I'm really digging it, and I cannot wait to see more of what this guy is all about. His partnership with Mariah is interesting. Even though she keeps trying to get far away from all of this mob and gangster shit, she just ends up getting sucked in even more. It's like quicksand for her. It's really interesting to watch. So this was a great episode of Luke Cage in my humble opinion, which had a lot of cool action scenes, it was really tense, and a great cliffhanger ending, and some great villains collaborating together, which is ultimately going to be a build-up before we get to the finale of the first season. We are almost there, and I cannot wait to see what they're going to do with that. I'm going to give this episode right here a 4 out of 5. It was a little slow and long-winded in some parts. That being said, there were enough memorable scenes from this episode, not to mention Country Time Lemonade. 4 out of 5 from me. Check it out, guys. If any of you did watch this week's episode of Luke Cage, make sure to tell me what you liked or did not like about the episode. Did you have any favorite scenes? And what do you hope to see from the rest of Luke Cage and all the other brand new Marvel Netflix shows? Please tell me in the comments section below. Thank you guys so much for watching my review. I cannot thank you guys enough for watching my videos. I really appreciate it. Make sure to check out the channel. We always have different reviews coming out. The fall anime season just started, so I'm reviewing a number of new shows, not to mention a lot of the ones that I've been continuing to review. So make sure to do your part and support Super Kami Guru 9000. I would really appreciate it. Thank you guys again for watching, and as always, stay dandy, baby.